Hello, everyone. Welcome to Coast2Coast Pinball presents Roger Sharpe, Pinball, The Interviews. This is a new podcast series that we're creating to document the recorded interviews that Roger Sharpe, the man who many credit with saving pinball, conducted in the 1970s with some of the biggest names in the history of this hobby industry, this thing, pinball, that we love so much. Obviously, if you're listening to the show, you may know of my former podcast, Coast2Coast Pinball. Roger was a guest on the show. I met Roger through his sons, Josh and Zach. And at some point in the last couple of years, I was informed that these tapes existed, that Roger Sharpe had been interviewing people, much like I was now interviewing people, but he was doing it on a analog tape cassette recorder in the 1970s, interviewing people with last names like Williams, Stern, Gottlieb, and more. So we have this great, what I think is like a modern treasure. It's like a historical find that I don't think Roger even realized was so important and so exciting until we kind of told him, like, look, let's modernize this. Let's put it out in a form that can be enjoyed forever. So here we are, and that's what we're here to do. And I'm glad you're here to listen. This first episode will be myself and Roger discussing kind of the why and the who and the where, what he was doing, why he was recording these interviews. Then we speak about the subject of Roger's first interview that we're showcasing here on episode 1 of this series, Harry Williams, a man who's been called the father of pinball, the Thomas Edison of pinball. He invented the tilt mechanisms. He invented so many features in pinball that lasted for decades and decades and decades that we still use here as we head into the 2020s. So I'm really excited that everyone's going to get to hear these interviews. I thank Roger Sharpe so much for opening up these tapes to be listened to and now put out into the public. He did not take this lightly. I think he held these near and dear. I think he tells us in his interview tonight that he thought about writing another book. But now here we are with podcasts, and we can reach the masses very quickly, and this is something that I think a lot of people are really going to enjoy. Not many people who've come into pinball in the past 20 years have any idea what Harry Williams sounds like. And in this show, you're going to get to hear over an hour conversation of Roger Sharpe and Harry Williams, who will go down in the history of this hobby and this industry as two of the biggest names. So, really excited. This is episode 1. We have some other great interviews, and we have some other interesting stuff that we'll share with you on future episodes. So, thank you for downloading the show or streaming the show, however you might be listening. This is really a gift from Roger Sharpe to everybody. So, without any more build-up, let's go ahead and talk to Roger Sharpe. It's my great pleasure to be joined here today by Roger Sharpe. Roger, how are you, sir?
I am good. Thank you.
Thank you. I am really excited to start this project. It's been something that obviously you've had for a long time and I've known about for a little while, and I wanted to sort of set the table for everyone. I became friends with your son, Josh Sharpe, a long time ago with my podcast, Coast2Coast Pinball, and he brought this to my attention and said, you really should do something with my dad with these amazing recordings he has. So I kind of want to let you tell people, because, we have this modern age of podcasting, and there's all these pinball podcasts out there now. But I think on some level it's really interesting that, you're known by many as the man who saved pinball in 1976. You also were kind of the first pinball podcaster, in a way. You just didn't know it at the time.
I never thought of it that way, but
you were doing the job. So I think a lot of people know you worked for GQ magazine in these years, and you wrote a very notable book on pinball. Kind of tell me, obviously we have these interviews with some of the great people in pinball, and we're starting today with Harry Williams. Tell me what you were doing, how you were doing this, where you were going to get these recordings, what drove all this at the time.
I suppose that, what drove me was the singular motivation of wanting my own pinball machine. I mean, it's as simple as that. It really is. And I think I've probably mentioned it on a few different occasions, but growing up in Chicago and being pinball ignorant, and then beginning my love affair with pinball when I went to college at the University of Wisconsin, moving to New York City to begin my professional career, and lo and behold, there's no pinball. I go from ignorance to feast to famine, and it was interesting because being in the position that I was at GQ and being able to assign stories to various contributors as well as to myself, it was like, I am going to do an article or a feature on pinball, and by doing that, I will meet the right people and I'll be able to buy a game. I mean, that was the baseline thought to all of it. And admittedly, as events unfolded, everything else kind of mushroomed out of that. It was the feature in GQ. It was the feature in the New York Times. It was testifying in New York. And yes, I did buy my first machine as a result. But lo and behold, doing a book and meeting people that were responsible for basically what we'll call it the birth of the pinball industry back during the Depression, and capturing their stories and wanting to pay homage to them. Everybody was working behind the scenes. It's one thing where you see a credit on a movie screen and it's a producer or director, and you may not necessarily know who the producer is. You may have familiarity with the director, but by and large, up until probably the last 10, 15, 20 years, most of those individuals were kind of faceless and not known to the general public. And here was this industry that I was fascinated by and drawn to. And it was my opportunity to pay tribute to them and try to chronicle the history. So all of that kind of unfolded in a way that I guess in retrospect seems seamless, but it really wasn't at the time. I was young, I was foolish, I was somewhat impetuous, I guess somewhat self-serving, but being able to really sit down with everybody that I was able to get access to and capture their stories, their memories, was inspiring. Back then, and maybe to somewhat of a similar degree, I think I still kind of have it, but I had a photographic memory. So I was being able to sit down with folks who were old enough to be my father or my grandfather, being able to relate to them on the topic of pinball, and more importantly, being able to talk back and forth in regard to various events, various developments, and being able to say, wasn't it 1934 and 1933? And oh, yes. And then going through microfiche files in the library and other places and really trying to track down things as to, how did all this start? What was this all about? And I know that son Josh, much more than son Zach, knew that I had tapes and transcribed documents and what have you that helped put the book together, and said, those still around? You still have? Yes, of course. I have them in one of my many file cabinets. They're, all cassettes. Well, there's new technology, Dad. You should transcribe those before the tapes are not able to be, reproduced, and get them on CDs so that you're kind of up to date. So, wound up doing that. And then it was a question of, you should share this with the outside world. The thought that I always had was that, well, initially the book was supposed to be longer, much longer than it was, because the tapes basically were going to be the core of the book. I always thought of the book project as being somewhat similar. I'm going to use a reference that may or may not make sense to anybody listening, but I am a huge Marx Brothers fan, and there was a book that was published probably a good 40 years ago called the Marx Brothers Scrapbook, and the majority of the content is based on interviews. And kind of tracks back and forth in terms of highlights of various movies and other activities and events in the brothers' lives. But much of it were interview-based, and I thought, my God, this is wonderful. I have a chance to sit down, with Harry Williams and with Sam Ginsberg and Sam Stern and so many others, the people who were there on the front lines. That's the book that I want to do, and the original manuscript that I had turned into my editor, he thought that it was a little bit too long. Nobody's really interested in any of this stuff. So it wound up getting edited down to, I guess, a more tolerable, appetizing nugget from the standpoint of Bill Whitehead, whether or not he's still alive. Hello, Bill, if you're still alive. I still am angry and frustrated by the fact that you changed tactics in the middle of a project. If you're no longer around, well, then sorry. But, I think that was the whole premise and purpose of everything. And for me, it was a life discovery. Best way to describe it. I mean, I came into all of this not knowing anything about anything other than the fact that I liked playing pinball. And the fact that if I had grown up in Chicago and Chicago had pinball machines, my life and my career would be totally different. If New York had had pinball machines, and there were some places that I found where they were illegally being operated, but if all of those various dominoes had fallen into a different sequence, so too would my life have been different, as would my son's life, and whatever the outcome might have been for the industry in general, who knows? So I never thought of it as being anything more than wanting my own machine. That was the singular motivation. And how do I do that? I need to meet with these people to capture their stories, because unfortunately, back in 1974, there were no books on the subject. There were no feature stories and art. There was nothing. There was one piece that I think it's J. Anthony Lucas had written, and memory is kind of scratched on this one, either for Esquire or for Playboy back in 1972. He did a piece on pinball machines. The featured game was Fireball, which, because it wound up getting that type of treatment, became the most sought-after game in the mid to late 70s. Oh, I have a Fireball. Don't you want that? No, it's a terrible game. Sorry, but I didn't like the game, but the fact that it was featured meant that it had some notoriety above and beyond all of the other, in quotes, generic pinball machines. That was it. That was the starting point. And just literally going through the yellow pages and finding that there were some, in quotes, distributors that were located off of 42nd Street and 10th Avenue in New York City. That's where the quest started, and it grew to distributors that existed, one in particular, Mondial in New Jersey, and Runyon Sales, Al Simon. That was my starting point. Oh, where is the industry based? I don't know. Oh, it's in Chicago. Isn't that interesting? Oh, there's trade shows. So it really was just, following the little, pieces of graham crackers on the ground on a path that I didn't know where it was going to take me.
What year was the article printed in GQ?
It was in our special, because back then GQ was only published 8 times a year. It was the Living It Up issue, which was a winter issue, 1975.
1975. And you were doing these recordings after this, or had you done some of the recordings leading up to that article, or was this post the article and working towards the book?
No, I mean, it was interesting. It was a starting point with the article, the feature in GQ, which turned out to be much more photographic and embraced arcade video games, as well as some other technology like Laserdisc players that were going to be coming for $400 in 6 months. I had to wait, I think, 10 years or so, and Admittedly, they weren't $400, and projection TVs, it was all high-end type of stuff with pinball thrown in. But in order to try to make a more complete story, number one, I wound up getting James Hamilton as a photographer for the GQ thing, the GQ feature. And I had started talking to folks in 1974 in advance. I mean, most people don't know, and I know that you're aware of it, Nate. There are lead times with magazines and what have you. Daily newspapers, less so, and weeklies. But, the whole quest started in 74, probably, I want to say around summertime, because the first trade show that James and I went to was actually a Florida State show. And that's where I met Nolan Bushnell for the first time. They were, I think, showcasing duck hunters, something close to that. Some type of a shooter. Duck hunt is probably inappropriate because I think that was more Nintendo. But it was like, oh, there's an industry. And again, meeting with folks in New York at the distributorships or out in New Jersey and trying to piece things together. So the interview process kind of started from the standpoint of I'm doing research for a magazine article and maybe a book. There was always a maybe a book.
Interesting.
So that was like the starting point. And it's interesting from my standpoint of going back and I won't say being somewhat insensitive to history or the historical reference, but in looking at the tapes, it was like, God, I never dated these. Why didn't I date these? Who was the first person I ever sat down with? Why don't I have that somewhere in some way, shape, or form? But again, it was, it was something as a young person who thought that this wasn't going to be my legacy to the world. I was going to be writing more important and impressive fiction, if you will, as part of my career. But, it was all of these artifacts, if you will, that I wound up gathering that kind of coalesced into something that was more complete. The piece in GQ admittedly did not result in any interview content. The piece for the New York Times, which followed in the arts and leisure section around the holidays of 75, also did not really feature anything. But by then, I kind of knew that there was going to be a book project. And it was just a question of getting the right publisher, picking the right publisher. So the interviews were kind of like ongoing. Just I had met people, talked to them, and then the follow-ups were the interviews. It wasn't as if I was meeting somebody for the first time, breaking up my little Sony cassette player and saying, "Hi, this is who I am. This is what I." No, I mean there was the upfront, courting, if you will.
Sure, and you were coming from a very reputable.
Time to do a date.
Yeah, you were coming from very reputable, outlets too. New York Times, GQ. I mean, that's going to catch somebody's attention, I'm sure.
Well, but understand that, the majority of these folks I had met prior to anything being published. So when I talk, literally like a year before anything was published, being at the Florida show and then hearing about what was then the MOA, Music Operators Association, that was taking place in September at the Conrad Hilton in Chicago. That was the first trade show that I went to. So again, predating anything that had appeared in print. The breakthrough was Happen Chance. I was at Al Simon, distributor on 43rd and 10th. They were representing the Williams pinball line. Al D'Anzillo was one of their main salespeople. Just to go there and visit and chat and pick up little pinball brochures, flyers, or whatever. And I happened to be there in an afternoon when I walked in, and Al D'Anzillo said, "Oh, hi." And they were, I think they had just gotten in a game called Big Ben. So this is a release that was going to be happening in 75. And lo and behold, Gary Stern was there. young fellow just out of law school and whatever, who was working with his dad, Sam, at Williams, and being introduced to him, and we went over to the new game, and I kind of viewed the machines maybe a little bit differently than anybody else did because of the nature of the questions that I asked and the response that I got, which was, so when you guys are laying these out and designing these games, do you take like that part, that wide sweeping outside part from Star Pool and from this game? And I started rattling off 4 or 5 games that I had either seen or had seen brochures of, assuming that that's how the games were designed. And Gary kind of was speechless. And I guess, some period of time thereafter, I was in New York and saw Gary at the Williams booth, who started introducing. Talk to this guy. I mean, he knows everything about. Ask him anything about pinball, and he's going to tell you and talk to you. So it was this great, entree in, and I'm very appreciative of Gary having done that. It was the first time that I actually met Harry Williams, and so many others just going around the show and being able to say, "Hi, I'm working on feature stories and maybe a book." So that was kind of like my entry into the industry, and seeing it really firsthand on a larger scale than the Florida show, and having Jim be with me as well, taking pictures of games.
You made mention of the Sony tape recorder. What was this machine like? You and I are recording this on, digital products across continents, across an ocean right now. That's not what you had in 1974, 75. What was the machine like?
It was a small is all relative, kind of a paper book size recorder.
Yep.
With tapes, my little JVC tapes and Sony tapes and Memorex tapes, whatever I was buying and finding along the way, and I think it ran on 4 AAA batteries. I haven't opened it up in a while. It could be AA, but yeah, that was my go-to.
That's cool.
Sit down on a table or a chair or whatever, press the buttons down, and hope against hope that whatever I was getting was what I was getting.
That's great. I still hope against hope when I press all these buttons. That's great. When I started listening to this interview with Harry Williams, it's very clear that he seemed very happy to tell these stories, and I got the sense that he was very appreciative that you did know so much about the history, and he loved kind of interjecting some details and facts and walking you through his history in pinball. Do you remember where did you meet him that day? What was the setting for this interview? Because there's some background noise in the interview. It's it sounds like a cafe maybe.
Yes, you are correct, and I think that it was very much probably a cafeteria or a restaurant. I want to say maybe, and again, just given, oops, sorry for that phone in the background. I want to say that maybe it was a place called Dapper's, which seemed to be one of the go-to places that was near the old Williams plant on California Avenue in Roscoe, or one of the other many places. Cass and Lou's was another place on Irving Park that was a favorite. So I have a feeling that it was probably a lunch that we were sitting at. But back in those days, not only Williams but also Bally had their own chefs, had their own little kitchens. Yep. All installed, and there were executive dining rooms. And you'd go, upstairs into the dining room, and there you'd be eating as you were being served whatever the lunch of the day was with the executives. So yes, it was over some type of food, probably, and it was just a question of really kind of sitting down and getting a feel for, his story, his life.
I know that after this interview, he went on to design some pinball for like Stern Electronics, and I think he even worked some in the video game space before he passed away in 1983. What was he doing at this point in time? And this was 1975, we think?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It would be 1975.
So what was
Um,
Harry's actual kind of title or role at this point?
well, I don't want to disparage anyone and or the memory of anyone. Um, Harry had lots of drawings that he was submitting still with Williams and with Sam back in that time. I think, God, I can see the game. And I cannot remember the name of it for the life of me. I know that it was green. It was card-based. It was one of Harry's games that he had done at Williams. It was Steve Kordak, Norm Clark, Gordon Horlick. Those are the three principal designers at Williams at that point in time. Harry was living in Palm Springs and, had lots of drawings that he would submit, files upon files. Blue Chip was one of the games that he did that was, I thought, very nice for its time. But I don't think that he was seen as somebody that either of those three gentlemen wanted to just build the game for him, to kind of take it on as a stepchild. So Harry's drawings kind of just stayed. And, he was, I suppose the best way to describe it was semi-retired. Not necessarily out of choice, just out of necessity. There wasn't really a need for him.
I've read that Sam and Gary kind of brought him out of retirement, quote unquote. That's something that gets thrown around.
They absolutely, absolutely did. I think that, when Sam wound up moving over and leaving Williams at a point in time when it was an opportunity to purchase Chicago coin from Sam Ginsberg. It was a perfect opportunity to set up shop and to bring Harry out of retirement and bring his imagination and his creativity back to life. There's a special fondness in my heart for Harry. There just is.
You messaged me and said that when we were talking about this show. You said you were listening to the interview and smiling. I thought that was very genuine. That was cool.
Yeah, no, I mean, he was a very special person. There are so many remarkable individuals that date back to the 1930s. And many of them were somewhat, a little bit off center, let's call it. And others were just kind of like straightforward and just like, wow, this is like a friendly uncle, or as I said, a father or a grandfather. And now being of an age where I'm older than everybody that I talked to back then, 40 plus years ago, it gives me a different level of appreciation. But with Harry, there was just like a soft spot. We just kind of clicked. Just friendly and just nice and, opening up his life to me, even to the extent, and you just asked before in terms of what he was doing and the number of games that he wound up creating while at Stern, the first iteration of Stern Pinball back in the late 70s. It provides, I think, an interesting perspective that here technology was changing. We were getting into solid state, and Harry's ideas were able to evolve as well. I mean, a person comparable, just because of the longevity of career, would be somebody like Steve Kordak, who was able to remain relevant. Many others, for whatever the reasons, either didn't have the opportunity or didn't have the wherewithal to continue their craft and modifying the craft accordingly and appropriately. But, Harry's influence, even with Brunswick, creating home pinballs. I remember going out and visiting with him and Wanda, his wife, and we were talking about, me tagging along with Harry and designing games for Brunswick. He was doing home games. He had knocked down, I think, 5 different ones because there was a push back during that time frame of late 70s to do home pinballs. Bally had done that with an Evel Knievel that changed because of the issues with Evel and his manager and a baseball bat. Elton John, that game. So the home games, if you will, wound up becoming viable. And I know that now, not wanting to jump ahead or sideways too much, I know that there's another, I won't call it a push, but at least another little foray into wanting to have home pinballs, forgetting about what Tiger Electronics did way back when and Ziz. But anyway, so Harry was still active, still had it. And he was just great. God, and yes, I was smiling when I was listening, just the sound of his voice, the sincerity of what he was saying as he relayed, so many of these stories and so many of these truly remarkable innovations that have become part of pinball. They've been modified and adapted, whether it's a tilt mechanism or the replay that he talks about, and some of the other aspects of just moving a ball from place to place through a kick-out hole and the use of batteries, power, and then solenoids. It was fun to rehear it.
It's really interesting because you realize this guy really, at his heart, was an inventor. He came up with a lot of just ideas that made their way into this particular type of project.
Well, yeah, and again, if you go back to the beginning, if the times had been different, Harry may well have become one of the best-known animators at Disney.
Yep.
That's what he wanted to do. And unfortunately, there wasn't an opportunity to do that during the Depression. So, 1929, what does he do? He happens to go to this assemblage of folks, and here's this person talking about a coin-operated amusement game and all the money that can be made. And Harry, runs to the front as he said it with a smile and a giggle and said, "I'll take Los Angeles County." Yeah. And, the rest, as they say, is not only Harry's history, but the history of pinball.
Yeah. I thought there was a very interesting point in the interview where he's talking about the move towards, more gambling-focused machines. And he saw that. He thought and knew ahead of time that could be the death of his whole operation and his whole bit, maybe the whole industry, because he just saw the legislation coming down around that. And it was very interesting how he was telling people, we can't do these single ball payout type machines because this could kill us.
Yep. Yeah, I think that, Harry understood that what was being created were games of amusement and a skill element, let's face it, no matter how rudimentary it might be, and looking at it and comparing it to today's games. But, Harry wasn't into gambling. These were games that, people could have fun with, even to the extent of, having enough of a foresight, if you will, as to what else can we do to reward a player. Harry was into, creating game layouts and rules, if you will, that would be entertaining to the player, that would be an adventure. Oh, if the ball goes from here to here, wouldn't that be fun? And suddenly, and if I can do this, maybe I can change the direction of it. And just when they think it's going to go to the left, it's going to go to the right. Ooh. I mean, I would love to have Harry be around today with all of his faculties and to say, hey, here is your play pen. Here's your toolbox.
Yeah.
What do you think? Because if you really take a look toward the end of his active career, and when he was getting into multiple level games, and some of the angles that he was using and choosing, and some of the pathways,
Flight 2000,
Well, yes, that absolutely being one.
Yeah.
We had talked about that, and my big thing with Harry, when we were talking about he was going to do a wide body game because wide bodies were big, and we already had Big Game, which I loved. I thought that was a great game with the bingo card. Just really nice shots. And I told him because at that point in time there were, more multi-ball games that were out, and I said, the part that I really don't like, Harry, everything gets thrown back at you. Wouldn't it be nice to have an area on a game in multi-ball where you can lock the balls and they can get kicked up to the top, and then they kind of trickle down to you, so you get to see all of that. And, whether or not he took that to heart, the net result was Flight 2000 and the way the balls, number one, were locked, and the way that they were released. And released to the top and, cascading down in some fashion. Because I just thought, that was the penultimate for us as pinball players back during that era. And you'd get to multi-ball and suddenly it's like, 3 balls are thrown right down to the flippers. And it's like, okay, fine. Let me flail away and get rid of these and get them back up and hope that maybe I can get some control. And it wasn't even a question back then of cradling a ball or what have you. You basically gun and run for survival's sake. So, Flight 2000, just a wonderful game.
I loved his answer when you asked him, where do you start when you think about designs? And I think you were thinking, graph paper, angles, drawing, layout, and he says, the theme. And that kind of blew my mind, because that's not what I would expect from pinball from that era. But it's great, because that is what he was thinking. You're right. He was thinking about the player's experience. What's going to motivate the player.
Right. Well, and, from the standpoint of theme, how do I do that baseball theme game? Where are the bases going to be? Where are the runs? If I'm going to do a card-based game, all right, how do I line all of this up? So it is interesting, because I think that ultimately the theme for Harry was absolutely first and foremost, and he was able to build around that. Take a look at a game like Galaxy. There's a little spinning spiral and what have you at the top, and trying to go, from basically collecting planets and collecting the Galaxy letters. All of those things make sense for that game, and you couldn't think of that as being a game with a different theme, if that makes sense at all.
Absolutely.
When you think about it. I think that, the games that he did, again, absolutely were indicative of that initial inspiration of, what do I want to do next? And this fanciful, fun way of doing it. I mean, nothing was laborious for Harry. He was always tinkering, and he was always gleeful. And as I sit here talking to you, there's another twinkle in my eye and another smile on my face as I think of him.
One last thing before we jump into the interview. Adam's family gets credited as being the greatest selling pinball machine of all time, but when you go back and look at one of Harry's, first games, Contact,
yes,
that sold a lot more units.
Oh, yeah.
That was close to 30,000 units by a lot of the reports that are out there on that.
Yep.
So I
as well as World Series, which sold over 50,000 from Rockola. So the way that I've always tended to give credit for the Adams family it was the most successful pinball machine in the modern era.
In the modern era. That's great.
So however one wants to define modern era, yes, from the 50s on through. So, no, when you're populating an industry, you have an opportunity to gain a much stronger foothold in terms of actual numbers for games that are kind of exciting and successful. So you wind up, continuing to build them to feed that marketplace and to seed it, if you will. So.
Well, I really appreciate that you held on to these tapes, that you've allowed me to be a part of this, and I think we're going to have a lot of fun going through these interviews one by one and getting to discuss some of the really interesting history of pinball, which is something we all love. So I think this is really important on a lot of levels. I don't want to blow it up too much, but these are special tapes. This to me is something a lot of people are going to find as a treasure out there, and I really want to thank you for your lifelong commitment, really, to pinball, and you're still out there. We just played in a big tournament together. It's fantastic. So I really do thank you.
Well, it is my pleasure, and at one point in time, years ago, I thought, let me do something with the tapes, and I'll come back with, a second pinball book or whatever else. I give all the credit to Josh, motivating me somewhat out of fear that, those tapes are going to crumble. Huh? No, they're not. I guess they won't. Okay, fine. Let me change it to new media so it isn't lost forever. And most of them I have not listened to for over 40 years. Trying to go back through the files to look at the transcriptions of all the tapes. I haven't been motivated to really head down to the basement and pour through all of that, but I probably will at some point. But being able to share the folks that I had the pleasure to and good fortune to be able to sit down and talk with, I'm hoping that everybody who listens to this will appreciate the pieces of history that have been parsed together from all these guys.
Rented a garage over on Western Avenue. That was in, let's see, we went into war in 1941, right?
Right, December.
Yeah. This was just before war broke out, because that's when they curtailed all pin game production.
Did you been in it up until then?
Yeah, and so when the war, when we rented this place, I had the idea that we could rebuild pin tables that were already made. If the war was long, the pin games would be getting worse and worse, and the operators would be out of business. It was a very long war because they had no new equipment. And yet we had to figure out a way how we could do it without using solder if we couldn't get any solder. And so we devised canvases that we would unsolder the old parts from the machine. We drop on this canvas to use the solder over again. We had to be prepared for every eventuality.
Yeah.
Then I put an ad in Billboard stating what I intended doing. A full-page ad. And my Lord, we were deluged by old machines as soon as that ad hit. That you send me your old machine and we'll refurbish it and send you back a brand new looking machine. Complete different playing features and everything, which we did. And that kept the operators in business throughout the war.
Wow. Did you develop new games off of the old games?
All we had to do is figure out what the game had available and change features around.
So then you resold back your old games?
We had a refurbished charge of, I think it was then $200 and some odd.
That's great.
But they had, and some of them really tested our metal by sending in a machine that was burned up inside, where it may have been in a fire. And we accepted the challenge. Cleaned up all the parts and everything. Made it brand new. Brand new. You couldn't tell that from a brand new machine off anybody's production line later. Of course, fortunately, we had friends in the business, like Advertising Coast, who could do screening for us. The cabinets we scraped down, and they made decals for the side of the cabinet. It was a magnificent job, and that was the beginning of United.
backtrack for a minute. How did you get into the pinball business? When did you start and why?
Well, I saw a game called Highlight out in California.
This is after Wiffle?
No, this would be pre-Wiffle. I saw a game. I'd been a commercial artist, and then I also wanted to make commercial movies because I could use artwork a la Disney style in my commercial movies. And because in California they were always selling something out of state in those days, like promoters in Los Angeles be selling oil stock up north or land out way out, and they'd have to treat people out there. And I figured if they had a moving picture of what they're selling, they could save themselves a lot of expenses by taking them in their sales room and showing a movie. And I made it so attractive, the price of a picture, that I got quite a few orders. And so I would go down the blind selling ads in the newspaper and call on them to get commitments ahead for that week's work. And one of these ads I followed was a company, and I went down, and they were having a sales meeting in this auditorium where this place was, and the guy was demonstrating a coin machine, which was called Highlight, a little upright machine, bouncing balls up into hoops.
Same principle as pachinko? Was it
similar?
Upright?
Similar, yeah, upright. And when he came to the take of the machine, when he said it'll earn $2 an hour, you put it in a 24-hour spot, look what it'll earn you. And my ears went way up. I thought, my Lord, I don't have to be out working. Those things could work for me. So I was progressed up to the front row there and said, I'll take Los Angeles County.
When was this?
This was in 1929. 1929.
There weren't no real pin games around then, were there?
No, there wasn't a thing resembling a pin table around. So that led me, gave me the taste of coin-operated machines, putting something on location. Well, needless to say, they did not earn $2 an hour. They were lucky to earn $2 a day.
Right.
But still, I could see if the machine was more attractive or could do this or that, it started the little inventive streak that I might have had to work. But on one of the locations that I put in these highlights, I saw this big baseball machine that was making $75 to $100 a week in a drugstore. And I asked the man, who put that in there? And he gave me the name and address. And I went, and it was the manufacturer that was putting some of these out and selling them. And I met a man by the name of George Miner. And this George Miner became a great man in our industry as far as engineering is concerned. I'll go into later. Remind me about it. I'll tell you about it. But the price was $695 a piece versus $100 for these highlights. But then I viewed the take on those two. They were worth it. So I contracted with them to buy 10 of them to start out with. And they did earn the money. And I had one across the street in Universal Studios, commissary. And one day I was collecting there. Now this was skipping to I think about 1931 or 32. I've been operating these in combination with radio rifles, which I had bought, but no pin tables were out. Still not out. And I walked into the commissary to collect as usual, and I see the gang of guys around this table there. And I pulled the guys aside and looked at it, and here's a marble game. And the name on it's Riffle. And the fellas are standing there, shooting 10 marbles, hitting pins, ball falls in the hole, and they add up their score, and they'd say, no, you added that up wrong, let me add it up again. And that was part of the fun of the game, though, at that particular time, was the fact that, no, you're cheating me. Well, 200 and 3,000, let's see, that is 3,200 and so forth. All right, here, you win. And they were betting between themselves on score. And so I thought, well, it must be a fad. But after the fourth week, and seeing my baseball earnings decline and that rise, I thought this is here to stay. So I went back to see George Minor, and who was the manufacturer of this baseball machine, and said, George, there's a machine out that you should be in. I will design a machine that I think will be better than the one I saw. And let's get into it. And we can get into it for a lot less money than this baseball machine. Well, George went out and looked at it with me. But he procrastinated and kept procrastinating and never made a move, and yet he had a manufacturing facility. So he didn't go into it. So my next move was then to buy a jobbing house. The only jobbing house on Pico Avenue was Jack Olson's in Los Angeles, and I bought him out. And then I got in contact with manufacturers. Then the baffle ball came out. Then Gottlieb had that. Then Ray Maloney came out with Ballyhoo, and that's when it started. And then after selling those for a while, I thought, gee, they still lack something. They lack something. I've got to get in and build something. So I started. When Mills Official came out, it was out quite a while, they died off, and the operators would trade them in. So I said, I'll tell you what I'll do. I will make you a brand new game, a new play field, and save you buying another new machine for less money. And it gives me experience, and I said it'll be an exclusive design just for you. You know, if a guy had 50 machines, I'd make 50 play fields for him. And he'd pay me just the cost of the play field because the cabinet and legs were there. And I used the Mills Official because it was beautiful, the best made pin table on the market at that time.
Well, was it wood?
Yeah, all sure. All wood. It was the Whipple principle of playfield, the holes and nails, but it had a beautiful ball lift, and it was just a smooth operating, this beautiful plunger. So then a fellow by the name of Saul Gottlieb, who had a jobbing house for his brother Dave Gottlieb. He was over on 7th Street, and he came over visiting me one day and saw he had seen some of the playfields that I had made. And he said, Harry, why don't you send the playfield in to my brother? He'll give you 50 cents. I said, hell, I get a lot more than that given to selling. I don't make 50 cents. He said, you misunderstand me. On a royalty basis, he'll make thousands of them, and you get 50 cents a piece. I said, you mean to say they do that? So then I figured, well, I will stop this rebuilding and build a game from the scratch. Cabinet, everything, of the way I would love to see a pin game made. And so I built the first game called Advance. It even had a metal arch, as of today, metal bottom arch, which is today, not wood like it was in those days. I put on a visible coin chute that you could see the last coin played, because they slugged the operator to death in many cases. He had no way to protect himself. But with the visible coin chute, the last coin that was played, if he had a hot winning score and the merchant came over, he'd look at that score there and say, can't pay you off for the slug that you used. So I had that on, and that's when I came up with when I was testing the machine. I had a gate on this machine. This is the first machine that moved a ball. It was a little mechanical gate that a ball fell in front of the gate, and then by putting the ball through a hole up at the top of the machine, would raise this gate and allow this ball to roll down into a higher scoring area. And it could accept all 10 balls in that higher scoring area, which was, I forget now, 3 or 4 or 5,000 points, see. So it was build-up, and it was motion. And then I put it on location to test it, and it tested so well in the drugstore. But I saw the fellas hitting the machine and hitting it underneath to make that gate bounce up. Because it was mechanical and it was on a counterbalance, and they could let the balls go through without... I thought, the hell, they're cheating it. So I went back took the game off location and put nails all through the bottom of the machine, little fine nails, so when the guy hit underneath the table, he wouldn't do it the second time. Then I thought, that's a very unsophisticated way. That's just an emergency treatment. I've got to think of a way to stop him from doing that. So that's when I made the little tilt, the one with the little concave pedestal and a ring and a little ball that if they shook the machine, it fell off the little pedestal down on the ring, and that was tilted. However, I call it stool pigeon. So I put that on the machine and took it back to the same location, and one of the fellows that was a regular player of the machine and was in there before says, "Oh, look, I hit it now, and it tilts it." I said, "My God, that's the more sophisticated name, tilt, instead of stool pigeon." So I immediately went back and had the casting changed to tilt, and so that's where the name tilt became associated with the game. Then
when was this?
This was in
31?
Yeah, 31 or 32, every time in that era. So now I didn't have the finances to go in production on that machine. But the idea that Saul Gottlieb gave me about a manufacturer back east, so a friend of mine was going to Chicago who also had a jobbing place by the name of Jack McClellan. McClellan and Stewart were their company, who had a jobbing place in Washington Avenue, said, please let us take back that machine to Chicago. We'll get you the best manufacturer, because we're dealing with them too. I said, all right, you take it. You be my agent, because I'm a bad businessman for myself anyhow. No inventor should ever be his own agent. So they went back there, and I got a wire. The machine was sold, but he did not tell me who he sold it to until he came back. And I wanted $1,000 advance royalty. So when he came back, he told me he sold it to Seabird, but he couldn't give him the $1,000 advance Seabird. I said, well, you didn't sell it to him, you gave it to him. So I got on a plane. In those days, flying was rather hazardous. They came out and put a box lunch in my lap, and in fact, the traffic agent even went to your home and picked you up and took you out. And I went back there, and I think I arrived the second day. I had to stay overnight at Kansas City on kind of weather. And I went in to see J.P. Seabird at the big Seabird plant. And he was in Chapter 77B. He was playing clothes. He had 2 employees, a secretary and 1 employee in the plant. And my heart sunk. There I thought I would see a golden factory. But he was such a charming man, and I could understand now why Jack McClellan left the machine there. He said, I will give you 10 of my phonographs in lieu of advance royalty with 10 tone arms. And I looked at him and said, Mr. Seabird, I need eating money. I can't eat those. And so J.P. Also requested that I stay there And I had to do it at my own expense because he just was evidently tapped out, or he didn't want to part with it. To get him going, he said, this machine will be my way of going to my creditors and showing that this pin game business was now, with Mills Official and so forth, that it was the new thing, and here I've got the latest, the first one ever move a ball. I probably can get credit and get my factory rolling again, which it did. But in the meantime, the money was so slow that I went back to California. I even had to send J.P. Seberg all my molds on the arches and everything, and the molds on my little coin thing, and the molds on the tilt. So I went back to California and figured I have to make a machine that I can sell here locally and get some guy that will manufacture it here locally. So I heard there was a fellow looking around to make an investment. He was in the carburetor business, and he was toying around with some big old 5-foot tables that just dropped the ball in holes. So that's when I came up with Contact. I laid that one out, built it, called Fred McClellan over, and Fred McClellan hit the ceiling once. And that ball fell in a hole here and a hole here, and then you put a ball in the top hole, and both of those previous balls jump out of that hole and go to a higher value. And then if you put the third ball in that hole, it jumped out of the hole, went around this ball, and into the next one. It kept a build-up principle. And the first time electricity was applied. And at that time, my knowledge was very scant, but next door there was a company that was winding solenoids right next door to my jobbing place where I made this. And so they came in, gave me a hand, and give me the right solenoid, put the batteries in, and that was it. And that started the ball rolling on the first electrical game.
Wow. Well, Contact was 1933?
Yeah. I think that was 33, the last part 32. My memory's hazy on that, years.
Yeah.
So, we took that machine. The local response from Los Angeles was tremendous. Oh, I might as well tell you how the bell was introduced, too. All right? Did I tell you that? We had to rent another place, Fred McClellan did, on 7th Avenue, which is a storefront to build Contacts.
It was an MCCLU.
Yeah. Capital MC, capital MCELLEN, McClellan. The phone was ringing off the wall, and he had a contact to show, so operators can, while they're waiting to pick up their machines, can be playing this one in the showroom. His desk was right there with the phone. This is constantly ringing off the hook. So I thought I'd have a good joke on Fred. I got a hold of a doorbell and put it in this one night. So every time the ball went in the contact hole, not only jumping the ball, but it would ring a bell. So Fred was at his desk that morning, and he'd walk in the back, and then he'd hear the bell ring. He'd run up and grab the phone, and he said, "Jesus, that's the 4th time now." The little lady would go in the back, and the phone ring again. "Jesus, I'm going to call a phone company." Well, there's several operators that were in on this, that were standing around the machine. They finally gave it away, but the machine had the bell. So when the operator suggested, says, "I've got a spot that can take 2 contacts. I've got one without the bell. Let me try this one with the bell alongside the one without it." So we did, because I thought it was maybe a playing feature, you know. So we put them side by side, the identical machines. The one without the bell took in half the money with the one that had the bell.
Before that, nothing had sound.
Nothing had sound. No, nothing had sound. So needless to say, we had to order a doorbell, and that's what McClellan got so angry. He said, "Geez, look, you raise we can't raise the price. Now we got to go out and buy $27.27 doorbells." I said, "But look how it increased the play on that machine." So then I got playing around we went to Chicago, and we were shoved off in a corner. This was when the show was at the Sherman. I think this was a 1933 show. And very few people came over to our booth to even look at the machine. They were all looking at every name, known names, you know. And Irving Bromberg was back at the show. He had taken up residence in Los Angeles and became the Valley distributor in Los Angeles. And he knew the story on Contact Out the Coast. It hadn't had nationwide acceptance, or I shouldn't say acceptance. It hadn't had nationwide exposure.
So it was basically just on the West Coast.
Yeah, because what could we get a day? We could only get 10 machines a day, the little place we had. And we were working on our probably 4th or 5th hundredth machine at the time of the show. So when we were back there, Irving Bromberg brought over his old friends, cronies who were distributors in New York, and told them the story of Contact. And then they began placing orders. When they heard the results that Irving Bromberg, and Irving Bromberg was a very astute guy, and they believed Irving Bromberg. When Irving Bromberg said something was good, it was good. And he'd tell it like it is how it good sells it. That if it's bad, he'd tell them it was bad. So with that, I said to Fred, when the show closed, you stay here in Chicago and open up a plant. I will enlarge the plant in California. We'll take care of the West Coast there, but we have to tailor a machine to Eastern dimensions. Space is much scarce. It's very scarce here. I'll make a junior Contact.
Oh, your game was big.
5 foot. 5 foot.
Did you use marbles?
Yeah, 1 inch acro agate marbles. 9 white ones and 1 red one, because the red marble's double. Whatever hole it falls in, it's double.
So it's like 10 marbles for a penny?
No, for a nickel.
10 for a nickel?
10 for a nickel. So Fred came back to Los Angeles and said, well, Harry, instead of setting up, he says, I contracted with someone to build a machine for us back there. I said, who? And he said, Stoner Brothers. I said, Stoner Brothers? They make the Aristocrat line, which is almost a custom-made line that they make games for each operator, almost the way I did. I said, why did you do that, Fred? Well, he said, it's too expensive to set up in Chicago. I said, oh, Fred. And I said, when do they promise to show you the first machine off their line? He'd given them the sample machine. And he said, oh, in about 3 weeks. Well, 6 weeks went by. In the meantime, we enlarging the plant out there. We're pumping them out for the West Coast and Texas. Texas took the 5 foot too. And we could hardly keep up with demand there, so there was no immediate pressure that we needed orders. But the Eastern orders, we couldn't handle it. So I got on a train and went to Aurora, Illinois, where Stoner Brothers were located, and sat with them. They hadn't even started on it. In fact, they didn't have a routing machine at that time. And when they started building the first one while I was there, they had the playfield set alongside of them. And then they'd look and say, well, that hole's about here, isn't it? Well, I said, oh, my heavens. I said, how in the world can you make a jig to have all the pins go in so every game's alike? I said, well, let's make jigs on this thing. So I stood there and stayed there to make jigs and get the holes of ball of wax going. I spent a month there in Aurora, Illinois, to get them to build games. Then the upshot is, if they get in production, the plant catches fire and burns everything. Wow. So I said, Fred, you've got to go in business here. You've got to go in business. Either that or sell the Eastern rights to the machine. He said, well, Bally called me, been writing to me, wanted to talk to me. And I said, well, why don't you? And he said, well, they don't offer anything. I said, then you've talked to him? He said, yeah. So he decided to come back and rented a place right across the street from Exhibit Supply on Lake Street on the second floor to start building contacts. And then when I saw the problem that it would be to get that thing in production, I thought, the more I thought about it, I said, if we could get some manufacturer to build this for us, maybe that is the best way. And I said, Fred, are you sure you talked to Ray Maloney? Oh, yeah, I did. But I caught Fred in a few untruths, let's say, so I decided to double check on that. So I went out to, I found Bally's plant out on Ravenswood those days, and walked in and asked the girl if I could see Mr. Maloney. My name is Harry Williams. And the girl said, well, just a minute. And I waited maybe 5 minutes, and then she said, you can go in and see Mr. Maloney now. And my first introduction to Ray was, he said, so you're Harry Williams, the son of a bitch who made contact. He says, why the hell can't I get a hold of Fred McClellan? Why didn't he answer my phone calls? Why didn't he answer my letters, my wires? I says, he said he had a conversation with you. He says, I haven't spoken word one to the man. I said, we were already on a first-name basis now. You know, because that man was dynamite. So he said, can you get a hold of Fred and we meet tonight at the Germania Club? And he has a sales manager in those days was Jim Buckley, another very likable, wonderful guy. And I said, I'll see that he's there. Where is the Germania Club? And he gave me directions. Well, Fred and I, that evening, to keep our appointment, rode the wrong way on the outer drive, got all mixed up, got a ticket, but we arrived at the Germania Club. We go in, and I introduced Fred and Ray Maloney. And of course, Fred was kind of sheepish to telling me that story. So Ray Maloney offered him $6 a machine. Now, this machine is going to sell for $29.50. Now, get this royalty. I'm getting $3 a machine, and he offered to pay my royalty and $6 to Fred McClellan. That's $9 royalty on a $29.50 seller, cause our name to be publicized in every piece of literature as large as his own, and guarantee at a minimum of 10,000 machines. Wow. I says, Fred, I says, you can't go wrong, can you, on that? He said, no, it's a deal. And they shook hands with Jim and Ray. They shook hands. I hop on the train the next day to California. At Albuquerque, I receive a wire from Fred McClellan. I've changed my mind. I'm going to build contacts here whether you like it or not. I went over to his plant, which was now located on Hope Street in Los Angeles, and his brother was running the plant in our absence. And asked him to bring my royalty up to date, give me a check. I went up the street, rented a large building, designed Signal, and kept my word with Ray, because he broke his word, and the handshake to me is just the same as a written contract. I said, Ray, I will give you the Eastern rights to my machines on a royalty basis. All you have, same thing, my name advertised, and still on $3 a machine, and which I did. And I built all west of the Mississippi, and he built everything for east of the Mississippi. And I gave him several big hits, Signal, Action. Then let's see, the page following that, I went on special run for Dave Robin in New York. That's when the light box came in. Genko, I believe, came out with the first light box. See, all games previous to that did not have a light box in the back. There was no reason for it. Nothing to display.
Well, there was no back. It was just...
Yeah, that's right. But Mills Official didn't have a little sign on it that they screwed on the back of that machine. That was really the forerunner of, you might say, a back box. But it was just a piece of wood with a piece of cardboard with instructions and nice artwork in it. But then Genko came along with a game, I think, named Kings, which they had a back box lit up when they fell in a hole. You lit the corresponding symbol.
Wow.
And it was a great, great machine. So I immediately adapted back boxes to games that I was making. And that's where the back box came in. I think Genko gets the credit for that.
The games were small, though, still.
Yeah, they were small. They were a little smaller than our average day pin table. This pin table here was my junior size contact. When I built, I see that we had the senior contact, the 5-foot one, and I built the junior one. I had Fred build it for the East. But the average game,
3 feet long.
yeah, 42 inches. The average game in those days was a little shorter and smaller than that. You could actually put it on the counter, and they were much shallower. So that takes us to the back. Oh, the electric tilt came in. I made a prototype with the first, you might say, changing score, not adding score. It was called multiple, and Ray wanted it, and I didn't want to go in production with it myself. So what happened in that machine, alone, aside from the pendulum tilt, I got that idea one night when I was dangling a chain, a key chain, and, like a pull chain with a little beads. And I thought, gee, I put a relay on that and a little arrow up on the arch and said, okay here and tilt here. Why, that would be much better than this marble arrangement. And this pendulum, if it got swinging, would hit the ring and energize this little relay and did it over to tilt. So I put that on that machine and sent it to Ray with also another feature. Behind each hole was a little casting. Not every hole, but about all through the middle of the machine, where it would say 1,000 on it, and you fell in the hole, and it would go to 2,000. If you went and shoved a ball through the hole up at the top, it would change any ball that was in these holes to a higher value. See, instead of making the ball do the work, I had a little drum do the work. So that was really the forerunner of your drum unit in effect, only it went half arc, 180 degrees, right, and then reset in that arc. So then I think the first automatic scoring game came in by Linda Rant and Ken Shiver. Ken Shiver was a big name in our business. Not a big name. Yeah, Shiver. He held a lot of patents in our industry. So he claimed. I never saw them. But he always did. And he made several games for Mills, of the 5-foot games. Mills did build a few of his games. I forget the names of them. But then they came out with the Wheatstone Bridge principle in electricity, where a ball would fall in a hole, and he had a little rotating drum up there that would add up the score. But I don't think they ever went in production. Mills never went in production. And I think, in fact, I think Ken Shivers was showing that on his own because he had moved up to the Pacific Northwest. And he didn't have a manufacturing facility, I don't think. And he didn't sell it on a royalty because it was too complicated for the day. But that was the forerunner of add-up score, except mechanically adding up scores. They did have mechanical add-up scores.
They did. What was the principle?
A little, Linda Rand came up with that. You know what a wood bit looks like?
Yeah.
Ball would roll on this and would turn this wood bit as it fell in and down and would rotate and it'd gear off of that to running a little drum.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
The minds behind all this, they've got these things.
Then big broadcasts that Gottlieb made and Airway that Bally made had little toilet seats on them. They were little cups that stood up, and as you shot the ball around and you fell in that hole, it would close off and make it flat there. But then the ball would run down, and the long hair would be the little places corresponding with the hole that you fell into, and it would flip a little window and show you what that score was. Yeah, that was Airway, and big broadcasts had the same principle. And two wonderful moneymakers. And of course, Rockola came into the field with World Series. David Rockola. That machine probably had the greatest run of any machine in the industry.
World Series?
Yeah. Dave told me...
36?
No, way before that. 34 or 35. Not the big World Series, the Marble Game World Series. An ingenious machine. Took in a lot of money, but then died fast.
What was he playing for? The same principles everyone else had?
Oh no, the ball fell in the hole here, and and if you had a man on base, you would turn him around on a little drum. You have a man on first, second, third, and then come home, and you fell in, home run and so forth. Then his jigsaw was one of the most marvelous machines ever made. It had a mechanical picture that was formed, with balls falling in holes here, would go underneath and flip up these series of jigsaw-shaped pieces of metal and form a whole picture right in front of you.
Were these payouts? These weren't payout games, right?
No. Complete novelty. Yeah. A jigsaw today, put on location, would probably cost a lot of money. It's so ingenious.
Wow.
In fact, I think perhaps Dave would admit that as far as taking in money over the long run, it was the greatest game he ever built. And after his tremendous success with World Series, which reached, if my memory serves me correct, 54,000 numbers at the rate of 1,500 a day, which he geared up for, he came with an advertising campaign. He wouldn't go from one game to the other like we do today. They would stop production and tool up
for the one game that was going.
Yeah, and he had a next one was Army and Navy football, a little football on the field, going back and forth. But it just didn't zap out like Jigsaw and World Series. And then Dave went into one-ball machines. That gives you some of the highlights of the past. See, is there any other important milestone?
How about Pace's races?
Well,
35. Did that really change things? Or?
No, that had no effect. The only effect it would have would be in the. Well, there's not many places to run paces races. There was.
I just thought because the price was so exorbitant versus the other ones that were out at the time.
No. See, Ray Maloney made one called Ray's Races, and Paces made one called Paces Races. And Paces was first, and Ray was second with his. But that didn't cut a big swath, except in territory where they would allow them. Right. Or where they open up and then they get knocked over. No, in the amusement machine business, what other great machine came out? Genco was a company that was a very viable company and made wonderful machines. That was the Ginsberg boys. They made some wonderful machines. ABT at one time manufactured machines.
ABT?
Yes, ABT.
What does that stand for?
The three partners' names. They made limited numbers, but they were very fine machines. And he also put jackpots, visible jackpots on the front of the machine. So you could see the money that would be in that jackpot. Of course, in the payout field, Herman Seidman made the first payout unit, and then Jimmy Johnson came along and made a payout unit that had more appeal in sound than Ray's. Ray's was motor-driven, and Jimmy Johnson was solenoid-driven.
But now everything has sound.
But this is for payout.
Right.
Real coins. Drop the money out in a drawer. And then we went through an era where we were making ticket games that vended tickets. In fact, the first machine I sold to Rockola was called Knockout, and it vended a ticket in two colors. It had a little printing thing in there. And I sold it to Dave Rockola, and that opened the door for me later to go with Dave. I took a room at the Sherman Hotel and had that machine all set up there, and I'd call. He was my first manufacturer. I called in because I pointed it for Dave Rockola because this is how I wanted to meet him.
This is before Ray Maloney?
No, this is after Ray. Yeah, after Ray. It wasn't before. I forget much.
What do you think the best games of the 40s were?
In the 40s? Well, our first machine out was good. Lynn Durant came out with Tropicana, I think, was his first one after the war, but he came out quite late after the war, quite a few months. Gottlieb was out.
By then there were bumpers, weren't there?
Oh, yeah. Oh, that I'm glad you reminded me. Bally came out with the bumper.
Yeah. That's before Nudgy.
Yeah. But, when did you hear about Nudgy?
I get around.
So, yes, that was a great invention. Do
you know who invented the bumper?
Nick Nelson. Nick Nelson was a designer over at Bally, and he, as far as I know, he was the one that invented it. Yeah, could I have some coffee, please?
Finished? Yeah. And I guess just some more coffee.
Yeah. In fact, they got a patent on that, and they took us all to court on that. And I forget now whether they won or lost on that case. All I know is that I worked around their patent and was able to make the same bumper but around their patent.
Well, before that, you did have the kickers, though, right? Kickers?
No, the first kicker was on a machine, which you can call a kicker. Because when I put, I don't know, for for no reason at all, on the top of action. All it did was the ball fell in front of it, and if it hit it, it kicked it away from itself up against the arch and gave it another spin around. I just put it up there for the action of it.
What was it, a rubber band? Or?
No. It was a little slapping device, like the arm on a relay, only it had a little switch on it. And if the ball came up against it, it would go whap and kick it away. And then part of the table. In other words, if you drop the ball in the top hole, one time would bring it up over here on the side, this time, and the next time you went in there, would bring it up over this side, and then this ball would fall into a place, and a little mechanical arm would guard that ball there, so the next ball that would come up over here would go around that and go into the next little trap. Then there was another place you drop the ball in another hole here, and there was a center area closed off of the playfield with a little cup facing up, and that ball that you dropped up here came flying back up the field in this closed-in area. Oh, they had wonderful action. Wonderful, because when you could drop the ball underneath the table, it gave you such leeway. See, because you could do something, have that ball come over here and come up and do something else over here. Oh, I was saying I want to get back to George Miner. George Miner, after that American Mineral Spirits Company closed the baseball plant out in Los Angeles, he came to a friend of mine and myself, Harry Snodgrass, and asked if we would help him financially in making a game called Hold and Draw, a counter machine with 5 cards, and you put a nickel in, and all the reels would spin, and then there was a button beside each reel, and you could hold any card that you wanted, and then spin it again the next time. See, like drawing to a straight flush or whatever. And the man was always a perfectionist. Oh, this man. That's why the baseball machine was so great. It was 100% mechanical except for the ball lid. And the scoring was mechanical. The greatest mechanical genius I've ever run into. And he made this thing and sold it to Ray Maloney. And then Ray Maloney hired George to be his chief engineer. And Ray was was killed in one of the first air crashes in our aviation history. Yeah, I was to meet George the next day at Midway Airport, and he called me. Then I got a wire he was killed.
George was?
Yeah, George was killed. A great brain in the industry, because this man could have... he made a machine which not any of the manufacturers bought, called Dynamite.
It's funny.
And I made a machine called Dynamite, too, at Williams in the 40s. But that machine was 100% mechanical. It had balls rolling down little steps that would augment a little score in drums. When it fall in the hole here, a little from underneath the board, a whole hopper of balls would come up and go in little holes over here, and you fall in another hole here, and just like popcorn coming out of little hoppers, little marbles would come over here. Just amazing, and everything 100% mechanical. Didn't use a battery in it.
Well, this is the mid-30s.
Yeah. Let's see. Yeah.
So what happened with bumpers after Nick Nelson brought it out?
It caught every manufacturer with his pants hanging around his knees, because the demise of the hole. There went the holes in games, practically, because the action now is off a spring. See?
Did it really shoot the ball out in the round?
No. It wasn't a thumper bumper.
It was more a mushroom bumper?
Just a straight coil of spring wire.
So it just nudged it.
It gave it a nice soft push away. See? But that's better than hitting something solid. See?
Right.
And it had 10 bumpers, and it had a projection-type totalizer, a little back glass with frosted glass on it, and the numbers were perforated in increments of 10, so that the first hit on a bumper would be 10, next hit on any bumper would be 20, 30, 40, 50, and so forth.
But nobody else was using that. They still were using pins and holes.
That's right. But we all jumped the bandwagon. That's why the patent's there. We all jumped on it.
What did it replace? Did it replace pins or did it replace holes?
Replace holes.
Because now you just went with the out hole on the bottom.
Well, and the kick-out hole.
Right.
See, the kick-out hole, which started the industry in the electrical business, you might say, the first electrical movement was by the kick-out hole.
Where it landed in a hole and then it popped.
Yeah, that's from contact, machine contact, which is the granddaddy of the electrical games, see? That feature has still existed and stood the test of time.
Sure.
Because the theory was right in the first place. The bumper has stood the test of time.
Yeah.
See? However, now, instead of having the bumpers per se over the board, we use targets, which is the same principle in a way. And then the bumper became a piece of action. Thumper bumpers. We very seldom use now the straight bumper.
Right. I think the mid-'60s was about the last
Oh,
time.
no, there's been machines made here in the 70s with a stationary bumper.
Oh, I know, but what I'm saying is in terms of overall usage, where everybody was using it.
Yeah, you see, the string of games that Lynn and I made at Exhibit Supply, we had one success after another. I mean, the team was unbeatable. Oh, gee, the industry followed. We led. And there was a company that was in bankruptcy again when we went there. And all I asked him, Frank Meyer, to do is to just give me the pin game department, stay out of it, just stay out of it, and live up to your contract with us, and we'll put you number one.
Fred Meyer?
No, Frank Meyer.
Frank Meyer.
Sure, the arcade king.
Right.
He and Fred Mills, you know.
M-E-Y-E-R, right?
M-E-Y-E-R, yeah.
Right.
Exhibit Supply, president known as, he made great arcade equipment. All your old arcades either had Mills, Mutoscope, or Exhibit Supply. The card vendor was his big item, the postcard vendor. Yeah. And so his units to work with for the exhibit were so horrible. He was so backdated with his stepping units, you know, that we had to bring him up to date. Bally had some fine units, you know.
How was Gottlieb in those days?
Very good. Gottlieb has always been consistent.
Well, I know the golden years were really the 60s.
Well, I would say the golden years are every year. For my money, every year. In the old days, we let Gottlieb, you know, at exhibit. We let everybody at exhibit. It was just one of those things. The fresh young kid Duran, and I have an outlet now that I can just not worry about running anything, just think of games and talking them over with Lynn, fighting with him about it. Let's do this.
What did you think about when you were designing games?
Well, what people would like.
Action and placing bumpers?
Yeah.
Did you think of angles geometrically? Or did you think of things for the moment and say, let's try it this way and then try it physically?
Think of a theme. See? Get a theme on a game. What do you want to do? You want to have lights out, make 1 to 5, you do this, 6 to 7, you do that, 8 to 9, you do this. Build up accomplishment. Games haven't changed in principle since. See, you're always working for a goal. See? Look at your games today. Get ABC, you like this. CD, you like that. Hasn't changed. That's basic. Because you as a player feel a sense of accomplishment. You did this to cause this. It's effect and cause. That's what it is. And besides, the ball has to have smooth play. You see, in the old days before rubbers, we had posts with a ribbon-type spring around them. And they would fall and would give it a lazy push away. And then came along springs shaped...
Here, drop the swivel?
Yeah, let me have this paper.
Ready, Ed? You want to come up a ham and cheese.
Along the side, you see, now you have a post and a rubber, right?
Right.
Pre this, you had a little screw machine post shaped like this. That you put on from the bottom of the play field with a nut. Then you either stretched a spring or music wire between this and the next post, same post.
Right.
So Charlie Castecker, I forget what spring company, who later sold out to Revlin, the one who made all the plastic bumpers, Charlie Castecker, developed this type of a spring. Hook here, hook here. This is a spring.
Right.
And there's your little post looking down on it now. The ball, if it started rolling, instead of rolling straight down, these little widening spots on the spring would cause the ball to hit it and come away. See? Hit it and come away. Unlike, better than the rubber, in fact. Because this, the ball can roll straight down. Here, if it started rolling straight down, it hit this and veered off. Hit this and veered off. And this had this kind of action. If you hit it, it swung back. Same as this rubber. See? But this is, and we had metal screw machine posts. Now you have plastic posts. Someone came up with the rubber, which is smooth action. You didn't hear any noise. You always heard a little noise when they had springs.
Yeah.
And then the other type posts were like this. Had a little flat side here. And this ribbon came around like this. The post over here. That would be on the playfield on the side. The ball would come along, the round ball, and hit that. And this would depress in here and then throw the ball away. That was, and here's what a playfield would look like with those things on it. Up here you'd have here, and then you'd probably have a spring here, then another one here. See, any place to throw the ball back. Then we had what we call flags. They were posts with pieces of spring. Here, let me draw it this way. Flat side here, then this was compressed on. That was driven into the playfield, and this was spring material. Ball hit that, and this would...
Yeah. Did you go back and forth, or did you just go up?
No, this was just like a little bat. A little bat. No electrical motion.
Like the first flip.
Yeah, well, this is where naturally the flip would come from, you see.
Who was that, Harry Mabs?
Harry Mabs.
What, 47?
Yeah, I think about 47, yeah.
That really changed the game, didn't it? Because you could really now send the ball back up.
This changed the game to making it a longer game, and that's the time the game should have changed to a dime, right at that point, from a nickel. Because now, of course, it eliminated a lot of things you could have done before, which was, for instance, you could put sort of a bingo pattern of holes at the bottom of the board. You couldn't do it anymore. Eliminated some play features that you had before, but it introduced the skill of the bottom, which was very important. We could never have won the Los Angeles case without the flip.
Right. Because before that, it was some skill, but a lot of luck. It was just a question of moving back the plunger and knowing how far to go.
As I told
Either
him,
that or maybe nudging a little bit.
are you going to see Gottlieb while you're here?
Yeah.
Go over and ask him if he'd loan you the brief
Okay.
from Los Angeles, because Judd and Alvin the other day when I was with them, they got it, and they came to me and said, Harry, that was a magnificent thing.
Okay, yeah, I'm going to talk to Alvin when I'm over there. Because I've talked to him anyway, and I want to tell him what happened with the article.
And they're such nice chaps. You know, I never knew anyone but Dave Gottlieb. And now I've met the second generation, you might say. And they're such wonderful boys. Judd and Alvin.
Well, Alvin's been very helpful. Everybody has been.
Have they? Unlike poor J.P. Kahn, that got the door shut in his face. Every place he went.
Well, I came with
you came
idea.
with a different approach.
Right.
Different approach.
I said I want to do a magazine piece.
Yeah.
And then I want to promote your industry through a book. And I said, that was it. And I have some expertise. And most writers don't. Most writers are writers. And I'm a writer, plus I'm an enthusiast.
Yeah. You might dig up that article in True. There might be a lot of things
I will.
Because the free play is. There's another thing.
I haven't shown you.
I forgot to mention how the free play came about, didn't I?
This is a list of most of the periodicals ever written. Just a listing. 1943, 42, 46. I have the 20s back here. 50s, 1932, 56.
Oh, that's great.
Full-time secretary that's gone through everything. Lists like this.
That's great. That's
Lead
ballyhoo.
off, lead off with the 1941 investigation from LaGuardia and William Hurlins. Yeah, I've done my homework.
Work in that Los Angeles decision if you can.
So
A writer did it out there. Did it for the Times in their Sunday section, an article about the trial in which he focused on me mostly. I didn't like one of his analogies. He says it was like hearing not Jimmy Durant. I forget his name. With this New York brogue sitting on the stand. Jimmy Gleason.
Oh.
He says, I thought I was listening to Jimmy Gleason on the stand. Well, anyhow, the free play came about. I told you that story, didn't I?
Way before bumpers and everything else, or is this?
No. This is
this way. At first, we had payouts and we went to novelty type pieces. We came in with novelty.
This is when they started flooding the market with one balls. It made me very frightened. Payout games and the ticket games, even though I was guilty of making a ticket game. And also a one-ball machine. I didn't like it. I did not like it. I made one-ball machine at my plant in Los Angeles called Turret.
Tory?
A Turret. 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 Not to sell out there, but to sell in Chicago. Chicago was wide open on one-balls. And many other territories was wide open on one-balls.
Yeah.
But I could see I was digging my own grave by making them for the industry, because sooner or later they had to be thrown out. Because if they threw out slot machines, this is maybe a little less innocuous slot machine.
Right.
You see, but it still is a gambling piece. And sooner or later, some city fathers would get up in arms about it and throw it out. And there goes our industry. Because they lump them all together. And the average person calls all machines slot machines, even pin games.
Yeah, I know.
That's their...
you can look it up under even Reader's Periodicals services, and it's gambling devices, gambling machines, and under the list of pinball machines.
Mm-hmm.
You would not believe how it's cross-referenced.
Well, anyhow, this is when I was making a signal in action on the Pico plant in Los Angeles. I had a little chap that came in after school to sweep the plant. This is about 17 years old, maybe 16. Nice kid. And 35 cents an hour. And, of course, the NRA wage came in at that time. So it must have been 1932. Yeah, NRA came in 1932, I believe. Yeah. 33. And he was always getting in my hair. He was in my experimental room. I said, Bill, your job is out there sweeping up the plant. Well, Mr. Williams, I was making a little thing. He had this little inventive streak in him. He wanted to, whenever he saw a vise and a hammer and things, he wanted to make something. And I says, Bill, I'm sorry, you're in my way in here. Get out there and do your job. Well, I could see he was sincere. So sincere, I never saw anything he made that I could have my fingers on that would be doing me any good. I figured he was making things for a home. So I said, Bill, if you really want to make something, I told him, I said, Bill, I'm worried. The way this business is going, they're making one-ball machines and ticket machines, and we know that they both pay out things. The ticket, you take over the counter and you redeem it. The money machines, you get it right there. I said, Bill, I want to make something that will vend amusement. Vend amusement. In other words, a continuation of play. I said, a free play. That the guy can play the machine free the next time if he accomplishes something. I said, now that'll hold you for a while. And you say, I never give you anything to do, that'll hold you for a while. Well, I promptly forgot about it. Bill's in there working, asked if he could have a key to the place at night, and everybody else went home. And I didn't pay any attention to what was over on the bench there during the day. About 4 weeks later, he says, I've got it finished, Mr. Williams. Will you take a look at it? And he has it screwed to a board and in a vise. I said, my God, what kind of a mousetrap is that, Bill? And he said, well, look. He said, please don't, hear me through on it, my theory on it. I said, well, what does it do? He says, well, if you'd make me a play field, I could demonstrate it better, but I'll show you. He says, now, if we could have something that would energize this coil here, he says, it would cause this drum to move. I said, yeah. I said, and he had a drum numbered 1 to 15 and 1 to 15 here, 2 drums. This one drum, he says, is the target you're shooting at, number 1. And if you hit number 1, it goes around to number 2, but puts number 1 up on this drum over here that you've won a free play. He says, now look, you can push the coin shoe free as long as not a 0 on this drum over here. He says, Bill, you got it. I said, let me lay out a playfield right now. I stayed and worked all that night, laid out a playfield. And we hooked it up for 1 to 15 numbers on holes on the board. And sure enough, here's this hole here, say number 6, and on this drum over here, by the coin chute, right up, in the arch over here, there was a section in the push coin chute over here. Here it says number 6. Well, if you get a ball in that, the next number will come up to 7 on this drum, and 1 free play will register over on this drum, see? And if you had a ball in 7 and 8, the beautiful part about it would, this drum would go 6, 7, 8, and go to 9 as your next number, and this would go 1, 2, 3. 3 free plays you. Bill, I said, you got something here. Tell you what I'll do. I said, come down to the office. I'll give you $300 right now, and 50% of the royalty I get from the East. I'll go back east and sell this to every manufacturer. And I says, and I will give you $1.50 per machine on every machine I use. $300 advance royalty. He says, is it a deal, Bill? Oh, I didn't expect that. He took that check home and showed it to his parents.
Right, you didn't tell me. Right, you didn't tell me how it evolved, but you told me about it. So
the kid wound up in an insane asylum. His head bashed in.
When was this? When did this happen?
About 33, 33 or 34. No, I could have stopped everything right there. It was ShopRite's idea of mine. The kid just was a workman, I could have claimed right there, because...
He was like only 18?
No, he was the oldest 17.
And then that's when the accident happened?
Yeah, sure. Within 2 months after this check was issued, that kid was in with a $10,000 check to his folks. He was in the insane asylum.
You know if he's still alive today?
I doubt it. I don't know. Lost track. Isn't that sad? Just think of that. Their parents only had trust. See, but they figured, gee, if a man gives this little 35-cent an hour kid $300, that must be worth $3 million. It would have been.
And he would have gotten it.
And he would have gotten it. Because they didn't know how to negotiate back here. So I can't claim all the credit on that, except Germany at the time.
Germany?
The germ of the idea.
Oh, right.
I was the catalyst.
Well, things happened around here.
Yeah, that. And you know what? All of these things that I have made are still a part of all modern pin tables.
I've noticed.
They're basic.
That's a fascinating part.
Yeah, they're basic.
Yeah.
They're basic.
Where do you think it's going to go? Without getting into like 3-ball and a quarter or, the whole thing.
Well, it's going to be 3-ball and a quarter. Speed is what we're after.
Correct.
I think we're going to see more intriguing things happen on the playfield.
Do you think they're going to get more complex? Or do you think they're going to get cleaner?
Get more action.
Like the new space mission.
Yeah, we're going to have more new innovation. Sam has a drawer there, I would say, three drawings per month for 4 years. That's 3 times 12 is what, 36?
Right.
Times 4. Well,
about 144.
144 drawings, and everyone's got a different feature on it, but they require tooling, and he don't want to spend the money.
New features above and beyond what they're doing, or innovative features?
Innovative. How would you like to see, for instance, here's your thumper bumpers here, and you hit them, now the bumpers change position. They change position.
It's great.
How would you like
what, around a switch? So that you
no, they're on a merry-go-round, you see. They actually change position. Now they're up and down. Now they're across.
Oh, that's similar to what they use at Planets, only you'd make them into thumper bumpers on either side. Planets was a semi-pinball machine that they used in New York. They also had 4 aces. What you had was a spinner in the middle. And you hit it up and the spinner moved around.
Oh, yeah, but that's spinning fast all the time.
Right.
No, this would
slower.
Just turn very slow. I've got holes on here. Now this hole is kicking up, this one's kicking down. Now this one's kicking across, this one's kicking this way. Oh, I could go on. I've got holes that go up here. This is a thing that goes on the playfield. The ball falls in here, is shot up here, and goes up on a track here, and lands over here someplace. I bend this track over here.
It's like roller coaster.
Yeah. Oh, the one that Gottlieb had? Oh, we had that. Do you know we used to run that ball? You shot it up your arch here, and now it went up. Instead of hitting this rubber over here, it went on a track here, and came up here, and dumped it off that way. I tell you, if you'd have seen the games, some of those games back in the 30s, You say, why the hell aren't they building those today?
That's what I say with a book. I said, doesn't anybody keep old ideas, the old games, prototypes, pictures? And everywhere I've talked to, they say no.
Don't you see, they sink into this well-known groove, and they take the line of least resistance because they can sell anything they make.
Yeah. Well, it's like the type of space mission using Spanish eyes, that part. You use Spanish eyes, really, which is almost like the horseshoe effect.
Yeah.
All right? Or Darling, Space Lab.
Yeah.
All had the balls going.
Yeah.
Rogo even did it for Bally.
Yeah, there's a lot of hitting that. Well, and you know where that idea came from that store piece. Where the ball's hanging on strings and you take the ball out of that.
Right. Back and forth.
That's where that came from.
I'd like to do a shoot where it's open just enough so that the ball can go up, but the ball can also come down. So
that's what
you don't have any
was.
resistance. Right, but I want it to go to an angle where there's a pop-up, and it can go in any direction, and there'd be things to aim at. So if you hit it one way, you know it's going to go to the left the next way. If you go back up, then you know it goes to the right. And it'd be like baskets.
Yeah.
It's for a basketball game. And you have either court that you can do. Maybe it's using two shoots, so if you aim for the right shoot, you know it can go on the right basket. But it's elevated enough above so that when it drops down, it can drop down into a kick-out hole.
Yeah.
Or it can drop down into some area where they're scoring on it and have it that way.
Build it. He's got one back there, and the ball drops in the hole. When it kicks it out now, there's no hole there anymore. The hole's gone. It's all smooth over it.
That's great.
See, now you've accomplished that. Now you've got free run here, see? I thought of that because of the fact that when you flip, holes are bad to flip at close range. They jump the ball,
right?
See? And I thought, well...
That's one of the problems with Bally's.
Another thing we brought out of in the 40s, I guess it was, or in the 50s, a thumper bumper that disappeared. A disappearing thumper bumper.
It went down after you hit it?
Yeah, it disappeared. And you brought it up when you did. It accomplished certain things to give you more action.
That wasn't like the center post, was it? Was it the same idea?
Well, yeah, it was, except the whole thumper bumper coming up out of the field.
Right.
Yeah, we built, I think the game was Gusher. Yeah, because you brought in a Gusher. Yeah. Yeah. We had that one. Oh, you could go on and on and on if you would start jacking.
Let's do this. It's like 4:45. And I know everybody's closing down now.
I want to thank everyone for listening. That concludes episode 1. That's an evening with Harry Williams. Who would have thought? Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you took away some tidbits from that excellent talk. Blast from the past. Until next time, this is Nate Shivers signing off. Take care of yourselves.